As an aerospace journalist, I've spent many hours poring over old Ministry of Defence memos. They are a revealing record of how past British governments reacted during times of high tension and paranoia over national security. Well, there's a really sort of fantastic, typical British understatedness about all these reports emanating from the MOD round about the 1950s and 60s about UFO sightings. We have memos here from Winston Churchill, for example, who was Prime Minister in 1952, saying, "What does all this stuff about flying saucers amount to? What can it mean? What is the truth? Let me have a report at your convenience." Fantastic. Lord Cherwell, head of the Air Ministry, drafted this reply to Churchill. It was typically dismissive. It explained UFO sightings as deliberate hoaxes, optical illusions, mistaken identification, or known astronomical phenomena. But Cherwell was not privy to US intelligence. He had no idea how the increase in UFO sightings in America could be linked with secret developments in defense technology. Here we have quite an interesting file from the MOD, the numbers of unexplained, in inverted commas, aerial sightings reported to the Ministry of Defence from 1959 until 2000. The sightings rise modestly from 1959, when you have 22 sightings, and then up to 95 in 1966. But in 1967, they really jump. They jump from almost 100 to 362 sightings, which is really quite significant and remarkable. As the Cold War ramped up, there was a significant expansion of the American military presence on British bases throughout the 60s.
I think the height of those tensions, there was something in the order of 18 or 20 US bases on British soil, and you know the tension was ratcheting up, and there was many incidents where there were full air defence alerts, aircraft scrambled, and obviously until aircraft had been able to sort of identify what had been picked up on radar as Russians, they remained until that point UFOs effectively.
But there were some very mysterious cases which appear to have baffled the MOD at the time. I'm thinking of the Robin Peck incident, for example.
The case you're referring to happened on the Norfolk coast near Brancaster, at a little village called Docking, and you've got the American bases at Sculthorpe and Lakenheath, not very far away. This case happened in the summer of 1969. A man called Robin Peck, who was returning home to this little village quite late at night, after midnight, and his light suddenly failed and his engine started misfiring. He felt this, what he described as like a wave of static electricity. And he looked around at about 200 feet from the ground with what he described as a huge inverted mushroom, a brilliant blue, ice blue colour. Suddenly, inexplicably, it just disappeared, almost in the blink of an eye, towards Norwich, leaving this glow in the sky. He was so shaken by what he'd seen that the following morning he went to the police station in Docking and made a full report. These reports went to the Ministry of Defence in London, and they were passed around from one division to another. They ended up with the Defence Intelligence people. And there was a little comment on the file that basically said maybe this was a UFO.
I could find no explanation in the Ministry of Defence archives revealing what Peck actually witnessed. Which is not surprising, since only a tiny group at the highest level of the MOD had any idea of what the Americans were flying out of these bases. With the expansion of US bases in the UK at bases like Mildenhall, do you think this myth about UFOs could have just migrated across the Atlantic to protect US activities at these bases?
Well, really, you're dealing with a generic problem here. You're dealing with sophisticated technology, breakthrough technology, and trying to protect the origin of that technology and the capability of that technology. And it's quite possible that a story that worked for you in the United States in the 1950s could be applied to the deployment of U-2. You needed to protect not only the capabilities of these sophisticated instruments, you needed to protect, in some cases, the United States' role in deploying these instruments, because this was a sensitive issue often to a host country.
Some of the strange UFO sightings in Britain and the United States might be explained by activities at a secret base here in Nevada. So secret, in fact, that, according to the Pentagon, it still doesn't officially exist. From a defense journalist standpoint, it doesn't get any stranger than this. Just behind me there is Nellis Air Force Base. Nellis is at the southernmost tip of the Nellis Air Force Range, a closed-off area totally barred to the public that's about the size of Switzerland. And nestling within the Nellis Air Force Range is Area 51, the world's most secret Air Force base. When Richard Bissell of the CIA urged his designers to think out of the box, this is where their imaginations ran wild. It's the testing ground for the US Air Force's most secret technology. When the U-2's covert life ended, this is what Bissell's designers came up with. The Blackbird is the apex of aerospace technology. When the forerunner of this aircraft first flew, the CIA's A-12, in 1962, from Groom Lake, otherwise known as Area 51 in Nevada, its mission and the aircraft itself was super black. That is to say, it was a super classified aircraft. It's very easy to imagine how anyone catching a glimpse of this aircraft in 1962 might have mistaken it for a UFO. Everything about this aeroplane is strange. It's black, its shape is extraordinary, and its speed, of course, in excess of Mach 3, that's 3 times the speed of sound, would have made it one of the most extraordinary sights that anyone could have seen at that time. Blackbird missions were flown out of the UK at the height of the Cold War. The plane flew at over 100,000 feet at the very edge of space. It was so fast that when it overflew the Soviet Union, it could simply outrun any missile attack. But it wasn't so much American spy planes that were worrying the Russians. There was something else in the skies that was causing them alarm. An incident over the small town of Petrozavodsk would trigger the largest study of UFOs on the face of the Earth. Russia's X-Files had begun. On September the 20th, 1977, high over the Russian town of Petrozavodsk,